Hello, everyone, and welcome to our monthly webinar series, Building Native Agriculture, Sowing the Seeds of Growth Through Capacity Building, presented by the Native American Agriculture Fund in association with Chris Roper and his team at the Indigenous Ag LLC. Today's topic is going to be HACCP and food safety training. If you have any questions to ask during the presentation, you can do so using the question and answer function at the bottom of the screen using your Zoom webinar attendee panel. You can type in your question and we will answer them as we conclude the webinar. We'll have time set aside towards the end. We will be sending out this PowerPoint presentation and a link to the webinar recording, as well as a link to register for our upcoming webinars in this series via email to all registrants this week or early next week. I hope everyone enjoys this excellent opportunity. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Chris Roper.
Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you all for joining us. And we appreciate you taking time to hear what we have to share and join us for the third Thursday webinar series that we have again this month. Before we get started and get too far into the weeds with HACCP and food safety plans, I do want to take a moment to thank an icon of Native America. Last week, Chief Earl Old Person of the Blackfeet Nation passed. Chief Old Person was the longest serving tribal leader in history. Chief Old Person was kind, smart, witty, and an advocate for all Indigenous people. His work has uplifted many people, and we can honor Chief Old Person through efforts to elevate food sovereignty and culturally sensitive agriculture. Thank you, Chief, for your tireless advocacy and your honorable ways of representing America's Indigenous people throughout the world. May your journey be as good as it gets. Thank you, Chief. So as we dive into our topics this week, we'll start with recapping some of the webinars that we have recently completed over the last few months. If you give me the next slide, please. Next slide. So what we've covered so far is we've started with business planning, and we covered grant writing. We've covered standing up infrastructure, the famous labor and training opportunities that seems to be the subjects of many webinars and training sessions nationwide right now. And now we continue to dive a little bit deeper and getting into the weeds of actually establishing food safety programs and continuing the planning process of what you have to do to be able to stand up these food security measures that everyone seems to be looking at these days. So again, we have a big part of this that's focused on meat processing, but as we get through the HACCP plans and the specific items to meat processing, we're gonna finish up today and cover some brief topics on FSMA training and produce safety and general food safety. So stay tuned for that. And we do have some great speakers today. Heidi Tribbett is a consultant that we have used for years on meat processing. Heidi has worked tirelessly in meat processing. She resides in Sterling, Colorado. She has degrees in animal science and ag business from Colorado State University. Heidi and her husband both have 18 years experience in meat industry and third-party auditing. And they also both have a lifetime of experience in agriculture. So Heidi's a good friend to me and our organization. And again, I've worked with Heidi for 6 or 7 years on various projects. And they've always been great support to every project that we've done together. So with that, I'll turn it over to Heidi and let her go through the specifics of HACCP plans.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I appreciate the introduction. We've had a lot of great experiences working with you and the tribes within the last 6-7 years, and it's been a fun opportunity for us to learn something new as well. I guess I'll just jump right in with HACCP. It is not the most exciting part of what we do, but it is definitely a necessary item. HACCP is an abbreviation for hazard analysis and critical control points. Basically, it sets up the framework for your HACCP program. It's a framework that has 7 items included in it. It's basically setting up your facility to know what your hazards are and how to take care of it and how to handle it if something arises. Next slide, please. A big question is who needs HACCP? What facilities may need HACCP? The Food Safety Inspection Service for the USDA, FSIS, they have the overall authority and the oversight for regulations for meat and poultry products. And in order for these products to go into commerce, basically across state lines, multi-ingredient products, in order to sell to the public or as retail, they need to be USDA inspected and therefore also requires a HACCP program. Next slide. Just a few abbreviations to go over as we're working through these slides, just a general overview. GMPs, good manufacturing practices. SOPs, which is a standard operating procedure. SSOP is a sanitation standard operating procedure. CCP, which is a critical control point, and then also CL, which is a critical limit. Next slide. With HACCP, there are 7 main principles. One would be to conduct a hazard analysis, and we'll go through each of these 7 topics briefly as well on slides. Determine critical control points, establish your limits, establish monitoring procedures, establish corrective actions, and to establish record keeping and documentation procedures, as well as establish verification procedures. Next slide. We'll go ahead and start with principle 1, which is basically conduct a hazard analysis. And with that, it is where in my facility will a hazard arise, or is there a potential for a hazard to happen? Some hazards for the USDA and for FSIS in the meat plant part of things can be defined as biological, chemical, and physical. So a couple items may be, if you're receiving live cattle, are those cattle over 30 months of age? What could be a potential hazard, which would be the SRMs or the spinal column, the spinal fluid and the column will need to be removed on the kill floor. So figure out your hazard, figure out what the hazard is, and then you figure out how you're going to prevent it from happening. Next slide. Principle 2 is determine the critical control point. So at what point in a hazard would be the point that it may happen? So a lot of critical control points as far as the meat processing world would be is a lot of temperatures that, if the carcasses don't cool down quickly, or if products aren't cooked to a specific temperature, that is where a critical control point can happen. Next slide. And then after you kind of figure out what your critical control point is, then you can set up a limit, a critical limit. If you know that your temperature needs to be 135 degrees, then that is your critical limit. At what point are you allowed, is that hazard taken care of? Or at what point is that hazard still to the minimum value that it is acceptable? That is where you will set up your critical limit. Next slide. Step 4 would be to monitor the procedures. And with monitoring with procedures, you basically have 3 objectives. You have to track the control of the process, and you have to determine where there is loss of control or a deviation from that. And then you also have to have a written documentation to be used in verification. So with all the critical limits or the CCPs that you're setting up, you have to have some information to back that up. Whether it be an educational document from the doctorate degrees, anything that's a published, something that is published that they have verified prior to you actually setting up your CCP and critical limit. But yes, you have to monitor everything that you do on a daily basis for your HACCP plan. Next slide, please. Setting up a corrective action. So let's say that I did have a hazard that happened. It exceeded the critical control point. The critical limit was out of whack. So then you have to figure out, okay, this happened. How are we going to fix it? And how are we going to try to prevent it from happening again? So this is a major one. And, it's something that you can learn from, obviously. If you end up having an issue, it's something you can go back and fix. Corrective actions are there to make sure that the hazards don't get out of control and that your facility stays within your HACCP program. Next slide, please. Step 6 for the HACCP plan is record keeping and documentation. With HACCP, everything has to be documented. And there is a certain time period allowed also for you to prove that your HACCP plan works and it is set up correctly for your facility. You basically have to have a HACCP team in place, whether it be your manager or some of the key employees who handle, maybe the slaughter side of things or the processing or the fabrication. The key employees need to know what their HACCP plan is about, and they need to be in charge of those responsibilities and trained. The description of the food, its distribution, intended use, the consumer, it's basically almost like a business plan as well. It describes everything that happens in your facility and what's going on. Verified flow chart for the entire manufacturing process. So again, basically like a business plan. The meat comes in or the live animal comes in. This is what happens next. And every process will have a flow chart assigned to it. And also with that, you will have a summary table just defining all your hazards. It will have all your critical control points, your critical limits, and corrective actions on those if they need to happen. Next slide. Establish verification procedures. So this one is a big one. So the establishment is responsible for the first 3 steps of HACCP. The 4th one is the FSIS or your inspector at your facility. Like in our facility, we have an inspector. We are his home plant. So he's there. He can be there as long as he chooses to be all day. On USDA slaughter, they have to be present at all times. They will inspect every carcass that goes through. As far as fabrication, if he has to be somewhere else during the day for a different facility at slaughter, we maintain our paperwork and he comes back to the plant and reviews everything that we've done for the day, making sure we've taken temperatures, making sure we've had control over the product. Those are a couple of the big ones, and keeping track of all the temperatures that go through is a big one for us. But we are in charge of the first 3, and the inspector or the government, the USDA, is in charge of the 4th. It just basically ensures that the HACCP plan is being utilized and used the way that it was written. Next slide. We are almost done. So with HACCP, again, it's not the most exciting, but it is vital part of the program to be able to market your products across state lines, to intercommerce. And it's a big program. It's a little scary at the beginning, but once you kind of get started with it and are trained on the program and trained with what your facility is doing, it's easy to figure out. Mike and I, we have worked with tribes, we've worked with other facilities on establishing their HACCP plans. We basically work with your facility to figure out what your HACCP plan needs to look like, what your hazards are, and we help set that program up for you. We do the training, and then we also offer support ongoing if your establishment needs that. But we really enjoy what we do. Again, we've been in the business for a long time, and it's something we love. So if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life. So that's how we kind of go about it. We love what we do. We love the meat industry. We like helping our customers. And so we've offered this opportunity to help others as well. And we appreciate the opportunity for speaking with you today. Thanks, Chris, for asking us.
Can I ask a few questions, Heidi? I had a couple things pop up while you were talking that I was thinking about. I was thinking about some of the things that we've ran across over the years that maybe we can help. Depending on who all we have on the webinar today, if you could be planning a processing plant, you might own one already, and you may be having some issues or whatever. But feel free to ask questions. But Heidi, can you explain a little bit how the HACCP plan helps you manage ingredients, allergens, traceability, those kind of things?
Yeah, so in a HACCP plan, let's attempt the allergen one. So in our HACCP plan, we do have a HACCP plan for further processed products or fully cooked products, fully cooked HACCP plan. In that, it basically lists out the products that we would make for that fully cooked section of HACCP. Each item we make, let's say for summer sausage example, that would have all the ingredients listed, the allergens in the ingredients that are required to be on the label. It would also have the critical control point, which would be the temperature, the cooking temperature, which makes that product fully cooked. So we don't have to, we can put fully cooked on our label. With our smoking system, we have a continuous temperature monitor. So we know that that product reaches the temperature that it is allowed to be called fully cooked. And then also at the end, you also have to make sure it reached that level of dryness or fully cooked, to call it that. And you can either go by, what we do is by pH on those products to allow them to be fully cooked. So they also don't require refrigeration. With that, we also set up a procedure for us to allow shelf-stable products. So you would send your product into the lab, and they would run a culture on it to see how long it is good for how shelf stable it is, and how long you can leave it on the shelf without needing refrigeration. So it's each product is like that. They're all very similar as far as the smoked products go. But you can do that also on the other end of just fabrication. An inspected carcass comes through. You monitor the temperature through the fabrication process, make sure the temperatures are always as needed and within limit. And it's basically documentation every day as the day goes. Same way with all the cooked product. But it basically, the HACCP plan spells out exactly what you have to do and what you have to keep control of for that product to leave your facility for it to be healthy and for it to be safe for a consumer. I don't know, did that help?
Yeah, definitely. That was good. Let me ask you this: how important, or can you explain how important it is to have your traceability standards outlined as part of your plan that you're working with on your facility? Can you explain how that works?
Yeah, so traceability is a big one. You don't ever want this to happen in your facility, but traceability is set up so you can go back to fix the problem if there was one. So, lot numbers are assigned to each grind group. It depends on your facility, actually. Lot numbers are a big one. We keep track of lot numbers for everything, whether it be a carcass ID and it's tied back to the live animal. And then that carcass ID goes through the entire process. It's hooked to the temperatures. It's hooked to the steak in the box. Same way with keeping track of the smoked products. All of those items are lot numbered. Those go on the product as well. Our facility is not huge, so we keep pretty tight grasp on what leaves the facility when it's allowed to. Like, for example, on USDA ground beef, those samples are taken for a generic E. coli, and those are sent to the lab. Once we know that that product is clean and the E. coli is not there, then we let that product go. A lot of big facilities, take the test, send it on. We're a small facility, and we don't want to take that risk. So we make sure that product is good to go before it leaves our door. And it's totally how the facility wants to set that up for themselves, and in their HACCP plan, how you want to work that part of your business, I guess I should say.
Yeah,
But
makes complete
identification
sense.
and lot numbering and traceability it's a big one.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And hopefully everyone can understand there is some flexibility in HACCP plans. The HACCP
sure.
plan that you develop and you work with your team to develop becomes your working document, but that's telling USDA how you're going to do business and how you're going to process animals, how you're going to package, label, test. They want to know how you're going to abide by the FSIS rules that are put in place. So once you put this in your document, that's what they're going to help reinforce. Not only will they be using the FSIS guidelines, but they will be referring to your HACCP plan each day throughout the processing inside your own plant. So you're creating a document that USDA will use to enforce on you. So as you're sitting down writing these things up, you want to make sure you have built in some leeway, built in some different scenarios that could happen, and know that the HACCP plan is a working document, that if you have something that doesn't work the way you initially started, you can change it. You can go back and update your HACCP plan and submit those copies to your inspector for review. And as long as they're generally in line with the FSIS requirements, then they're not going to have a problem with that. But they're always going to leave it up to you to prove how you're going to maintain your processing and be in compliance with the rules. So you have to keep that in mind when you are setting up these plans. Something else that's really important, and Heidi and Mike work with us as well on, is the training. Each one of these facilities must have the employees trained. You can't open a facility and not have your employees trained on how to even open this book and go through it and know the critical control points, know the daily checklist that has to happen. There's pre-operational checklists that must be looked at. All the critical control levels, as Heidi mentioned, for shelf stable, for cook times, for slaughter. All these operations have a checklist that will have to be set up. And as the plant owner, you're responsible for setting up these processes. USDA will not come in and give you these processes to follow. They're going to ask you for your processes. So that's where you will typically need help from a consultant to help you develop these processes that you can live with on a daily basis. And a consultant that has experience in running their own plant, obviously, will be able to help guide you through the process and not make it cumbersome along the way. A lot of times our workers in the plant, they've never done it before. They don't have the experience. Once in a while, you can find people that will have some experience working in meat processing, but very seldom do they have experience in working in an inspected facility. So it's very, very important to make sure these employees understand the process and at least have the advantage of being trained. If we don't train them before the plant opens and along the way while the plant is operational, then we're just setting them up for failure. So I know there was a question. Let me read this question off from looks like from the Pawnee Nation. It says, how expensive is it to have your operation inspected? That is a two-sided question, unfortunately. USDA does not charge you for inspection of your plant during normal business hours. Specifically in Oklahoma, I can talk to Oklahoma there. If you are an FSIS inspected facility, normal processing hours that you establish will not be charged. If you work that inspector overtime, they will charge you an overtime fee. And if you are doing FSIS inspection on bison, they will charge you a bison inspection fee as well. There's also an extra fee for grading of product. If you have beef that is processed that you want graded, there will be a separate grader that comes from AMS, Ag Marketing Service. And they dispatch those people, and who knows where they'll come from. They could come from Oklahoma City, Kansas City, somewhere in Kansas, who knows where they'll come from, but they'll dispatch them and they will charge you from the time they leave their door till the time they get back. So that's where some of the fees do come in, but some of the other fees on having an inspected facility come in line with setting up your facility to do and handle inspection. So again, there's not a fee for the actual inspection during normal work hours, but the cost comes in is, writing these plans, doing the training, having the employees on hand to do the paperwork. That's where the actual cost comes in. And sometimes even down to your equipment. If you don't have the proper equipment to do or to work in an inspected facility, you could have to change equipment, cutting surfaces, signage, hand washing sinks, all these kinds of things you have to be in compliance with an inspected facility. So I hope that answers your question. I can't give you an exact set cost for what these things cost, but it does add up depending on how large your facility is and what kind of products you're making. Heidi, did you have anything to add to that before we
No,
go on?
that's good.
Let's see, make sure I answered that question before we go on. Okay. Are we ready to go on to Shelby now? Let's see, next slide, please. Shelby, you want to take it over from here?
Yes. So this part will probably be pretty short, but it's all about food safety planning. As part of FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act, it requires fruit and vegetable growers to be certified by the FDA to be able to sell that produce. And we kind of touched on this some in the last webinar too. So if I'm missing something, you can also go back and review last month's webinar. But there are several different types of trainings that all kind of fall under FSMA, and the requirements for each will differ, but some people will need the Produce Safety Alliance growers training that covers the FSMA produce safety rule, farm food safety plans. There's also good manufacturing practices known as GMP courses. There's also preventative controls qualified individuals certification, which is PCQI. And FSMA does require food and beverage facilities to have at least one PCQI on staff. Next slide, please. And those are just like a few examples of things you might need. There are many more out there. And so one great resource to help you narrow down and see what kind of produce safety training you might need is this food safety needs assessment. It is from the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Initiative. And when these slides are sent out, you can click on this to be able to take you to that resource. And it is a whole questionnaire based on what types of products that you are trying to put out, what type of business or company you are, number of employees, things like that, to help see what kinds of trainings that you will need. Looks like Whitney just put that link in the chat as well. Other types of resources that are offered by IFAI and the Intertribal Agriculture Council is they offer webinars on all these different things. There are also some in-person certification trainings, and IFAI also does a lot of model food code assistance. So if you're a tribe and are looking for some kind of model food code, they can help you with that and have lots of resources available. Next
One
slide.
thing on that too, Shelby, they will also help you set up a tribal Department of Agriculture, which is very important. If you all can make a note of that and look that one up. But if you're going to go into a lot of food production, I think it's very important to really look at that tribal Department of Agriculture. And then underneath that Department of Agriculture, you can adopt food codes, as well as a lot of other policies that you might need to have inside your tribe. So I wanted to add that before you went on, Shelby.
Perfect, thank you. Next slide. There are also some financial resources that are offered by NAF that aren't necessarily related to the food and produce safety trainings, but they are a little more widely applicable. This link is clickable as well. But there are Native Farmer, Rancher, and Fisher Sovereignty Series. And it covers business planning, sources of farm financial information, and some other stuff. Chris, do you have anything to add about this?
You know, there's a lot of great resources right now. I get the email blasts and email newsletters from a lot of different organizations. I highly recommend getting on USDA's website and trying to make sure you're getting newsletters from Farm Service Agency, Natural Resource Conservation District, as well as the USDA general newsletter. They will tell you the updates for funding that's coming out. If you all are looking for funding, they'll tell you if there's policy or if there's roundtable discussions. Meat processing is huge right now, as well as logistics, as you all know. So just make sure that you're subscribing to these newsletters so that you can stay up to date on all of the latest news coming out. Native American Ag Fund is very good about doing the recap in their newsletter, as well as the Indigenous Food and Agriculture Group and IAC. So make sure you're signing up for those newsletters. I know sometimes it can be overwhelming when you're getting a lot of extra emails throughout the day, but the information that they're passing out is very beneficial. So even if you don't need it, you can always delete it real quick. Something else I wanted to go back real quick on, just because I know we have some Oklahoma tribes listening now. We've done a few Oklahoma tribal processing facilities. One was a full USDA FSIS inspected facility. One ended up being a shared inspection between USDA FSIS and the state of Oklahoma. There are some benefits to working with the state of Oklahoma as well. The Oklahoma Department of Agriculture considers bison an amenable species, and they do not charge an inspection fee for bison. So if you're in Oklahoma and you are planning to process bison or quite a few bison, you may want to look at the state inspection that they do there, or you can reach out and contact us and we'll give you more information on that. But those bison inspection fees can really add up to be quite a lot of money per animal, even if you're processing a lot of bison. So we can help you through that process. And working with the Oklahoma Department of Ag is, they're really, really great folks there. If you don't have experience with them, they're really good to work with. Most, no matter what state you're from, I work with a lot of different states, and the Department of Agriculture is really looking to help tribes boost food security. They really want to see more food production in their state, obviously. So no matter what state you're in, I would be comfortable saying that you could reach out to your Department of Agriculture and at least get resources, support. I wouldn't expect a lot of funding to come through those. I see a lot of different programs, and a lot of the states are funding the small meat packers and small meat plants. But definitely they're a good resource to have on your side and to be able to call if you do need something. So feel free to reach out on that if you need more information on that. Did you have more slides there, Shelby?
Yeah, I think there's a couple more.
Okay, sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, you can go on to the next one. Yeah, this was some of those funding opportunities. The Indian Community ICDBG. It does close very soon. Just 4 days. So
Yeah, the
we've
ICDBG
already
is
been working
closing on
that.
Monday.
Yeah.
That
so
one
we've already
closes
been
Monday,
working on
but
that. Go ahead and get that submitted. And if you haven't,
Yeah.
keep it on your radar for next year. The Indian Housing Block Grant is due in just about 5 weeks. So it's another one, and just keep checking grants.gov weekly. If you're not already, they have newsletters as well, or like little blasts that kind of go out as different opportunities come up. So those are some things that are on our radar right now.
there is another grant out from USDA for small processors and specifically small food processors. So if you're an existing food processor, they have a grant opportunity. It's for COVID relief funding. Basically, it's up to $20,000 for COVID supplies. But that COVID supply list is very, very broad. So it covers a lot of things. So if you're already in processing, you might look that one up, but it will be on grants.gov as well. It just opened about 2 weeks ago, I believe.
All right.
Is there another slide, or is that about it?
I think we're getting close.
There
I
you
went ahead
go.
and put all of the dates for our future webinars on here and kind of what the topics are. And so our next one will be how to use tribal products in retail and vertical integration. And that'll be November 18th. And then we'll be going monthly through May of next year. So this is that full list. And I think as you register for one, you can actually register for the whole, for all of them at once to make it a little more convenient. And then this is our contact information for Chris and I and Heidi as well.
And please feel free to reach out if you see other items that you would like more information on, or if you would like to see other webinars that Native American Ag Fund could possibly support or work through. Please let us know and share that information. But feel free to always reach out for anything you might need. If we don't know the answer, we'll try to get you to the right people that do. So we appreciate you all listening today. And if you all ever have any questions, please let us know. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris and Heidi and Shelby. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you have any questions, you can submit them here in the chat function. While we have just a few minutes here, I maybe have one question, just kind of for our final thoughts here for Heidi, if you want to jump in on this. Do you have any advice for someone setting up a HACCP plan for the first time, or any major lessons learned or experience when you're coming at this from someone who's doing this for the first time?
If you don't have any past experience with it, I would say find someone to help you with it to begin with. But there are also some trainings out there as well that you can get into for HACCP, and some classes. But if it's something that you're jumping into brand new, I would suggest just biting the bullet and finding someone to help you with the program.
Thank you. Any other final closing thoughts from either Chris or Shelby or Heidi?
I think I'm good. It is, Heidi mentioned it. It's worthwhile to just build some assistance into your budget when you're starting up a facility from scratch, because you really don't know what you don't know, and sometimes until it's too late. So it's definitely better to hire the people that can get you to the finish line most efficiently. These consultants can help you along the way, and ultimately they'll save you money. They'll save you money in mistakes, save you from buying equipment that maybe you don't need. And they can also help with, we've helped a lot of different folks, even down to employment applications and job descriptions, what these different jobs need to do and what these folks need to be skilled at. And if they come in with no skills, we can help with training programs. So just feel free to reach out, and we can point you in the right direction for any assistance you might need.
Great, thank you. And as a reminder, we will be sending out this PowerPoint presentation and a link to this webinar recording. So you will have everyone's contact information if you haven't had a chance to capture that yet on the screen. But we do appreciate everyone and your time for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you in November for our next webinar. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.